As a teacher, I find the end of the school year as both a time for excitement and dread. Excitement because, hey, we're almost done with this school year and we're really close to summer break, but dread because things can get really hectic. And it can be super stressful if you don't plan for it correctly because there are so many factors that are out of your control that can throw a wrench in your normal routine. So in this video, I'm covering how to prepare for the end of the school year so that it's much more manageable and even possibly enjoyable. So the first thing that you need to consider when planning for the end of the school year is your school's calendar and activities. So what are the end of the year activities that you have to participate in? So these could be any kind of class or grade level parties, any kinds of promotions or graduations, celebrations. Maybe you guys have finals or testing like we do, or maybe you guys have like some kind of textbook or Chromebook or iPad return that everyone has to participate in. So these are things that have already been predetermined. So basically you want to use whatever calendar that you have and input these dates because you have to participate in these. And then you have to look back at the bigger picture. How much time do you actually have for instruction? How many instructional days are left between right now and the very last day of school? Because that's going to determine what you can actually teach. And then you have to also think about, what do you still need to teach? Are there any things that maybe you're going to be testing or assessing somehow towards the end of the month or end of the school year that you still have yet to cover? So that's going to give you a better picture of what you can do. But this is not so that you panic and, freak out because you haven't covered everything, but it's so that you can be really strategic in terms of what you're going to teach next. Now, you might have to be realistic because maybe you don't have time to cover everything. I mean, it happens to all of us, especially if you're a newer teacher. So hit the big things that you're going to be assessing, or especially things that they're going to definitely need in the next grade. You can hit those and reteach them and cover them again so that you make sure they remember it when they move on to the next grade. Also, you want to consider any end of the year types of tasks that your administration wants you to do. So this could be any repair requests. So maybe there are things that have been broken that are going to get repaired, hopefully repaired over the summer. And then are there any supply requests that you might need? And it's going to take some time for them to take care of that over the summer. Sometimes in some schools and districts, they have some money at the end of the school year and they want to make sure they spend it all. So if that's your situation, then definitely get those requests in so that you can get more supplies for next school year. Also, sometimes teachers are required to pack up their classrooms so that the custodians can do a deep cleaning, like mopping or maybe like vacuuming and shampooing the carpets and dusting, things like that. So if you do have to do that, the end of the school year is a great time to have your students help you pack up so that you don't have to do it all by yourself. Now, obviously you don't want to trust them with anything really fragile or with any kinds of files with students' names on them, but you can have them take boxes of markers or pens and things like that, or paper, and put it into cupboards or in shelves for you, and that would actually save you a lot of time. The next thing that you want to consider when planning for the end of the school year is your expectations. And so I really encourage you during this time to modify your expectations. Don't necessarily do everything that you had planned if it's going to stress you out and create a ton of work. I used to do this in the past where I would have some kind of a project or something major for them to do at the end of the school year. And I thought it was great because it was like this culminating thing to really show me what they've learned. But then I had to grade it. The kids wanted to know what they got on it, or they wanted to present it or something like that. And with all the other activities that I mentioned before that the school requires you to do, I just didn't actually plan time to grade it or assess it or even look at it. So maybe question whether or not you need to do all the things that you'd hope that you could do at the end of the school year, especially some things that you tend to have more fun with. And maybe next year you can plan it better so that you start earlier and don't stress yourself out at the end of the school year. And if there are things that you are required to do, you don't have to do it at 100%. you can do it at 50% effort, and maybe you have to like give these particular assignments. Well, maybe you don't grade all of those assignments. Maybe you don't grade the entire assignment. Maybe instead of it being individual work, it's just classwork. That way you can ease the stress and all the stuff that you need to do in the end of the school year when frankly you're burnt out. How I think of it is, if you work out, you can probably relate to this, where if you work out too hard, too much, your body doesn't have any time to recover and it starts to hurt. It's because it's your body telling you that you're doing too much. And so if you can't even think straight at the end of the school year, and if you are seriously burnt out, then stop adding more stuff to your plate that's going to create a lot of work. Simplify everything that you're doing and don't feel like a bad teacher about it, because you did your job for the other months of the school year. And now what we want to focus on is just like making it through. So again, this includes any kind of projects that requires a lot of managing or grading. You can still do some really great project-based learning at the end of the school year, as long as you make it so that they're not too convoluted, they're not too complicated. And I'm actually going to be making an episode about project-based learning in general, but especially at the end of the school year. So be sure to click that like and subscribe button so that you don't miss out on that episode. And finally, if you can, avoid teaching new concepts unless you absolutely have to for testing purposes or because you're just required to. Students at this time of the year, you probably know this, they're not really sponges anymore, and they're not really ready to learn anything new. Plus, are you really going to have enough time to practice it this late in the year? So I would avoid teaching something brand new unless you absolutely have to. The next thing that you need to consider when planning for the end of the school year is just having a lot of empathy. Empathy for yourself and empathy for your students. Now, first of all, we need to acknowledge the fact that during this time of year, the kids are going to be different for multiple reasons. For one, they're pretty much at the end of whatever their current grade is, and they're starting to become whatever the next age or the next grade is. So for example, I have 7th graders. They're not really 7th graders anymore. In May, they're starting to behave and act like 8th graders. And so they're going to be a little bit different, and that's something that you should anticipate and something that you shouldn't fight. They're not going to seem normal during this time of year. They're also going to be burnt out and completely checked out. Well, most of them. And so you have to ask yourself, is this the time to hit them with something really heavy, some really complicated learning, when you know that they don't have the mental capacity? And let's be honest, neither do you. I know you're burnt out. I know that you also need this upcoming break. So why would you torture yourself and your students by doing anything really hard? If you don't want to do a lot of work, then why are you giving them a lot of work? So again, have some empathy, because at one point in time, you were in their shoes and you were going through this as well. So if you can relate to that, then don't do it to them if you didn't want it done to you. So this means matching activities to your students' energy levels. So sometimes at the end of the year, students are crazy. They're hyper, they're running all around the place, and they just want to get that energy out. So you might have to do something that's more tactile, where they're actually making something or solving a problem together. Again, like project-based learning, as opposed to sitting and listening to you lecture. On the other hand, if your students are really lazy and burnt out and they don't have a lot of energy, then maybe it's the time for them to do something that's a little bit quieter, some more individual practice, or some group practice that doesn't require them to like have to get up and move around when you can tell that they don't want to do that. I'd also suggest reframing student behaviors at this time. So you might have a student who has rubbed you the wrong way this entire year, and that last month of school, they're going to really start to annoy you. I can tell you this from experience. And so how I get over this every year is I stop thinking of them as being annoying. I just think of them as just being a kid. Even if they're a senior, they're still not quite an adult. I mean, they probably couldn't adult very well on their own, and they're just reacting to their emotions and hormones in the environment. So I would just start to try to reframe it this last month of school so that they don't drive you crazy. I had a student last year who was an 8th grader, and they would not stop talking the entire year. They were one of those students that would talk to everyone no matter what group I put them in. They would talk across the room. They were really loud when they came in, and they usually came in late. And so I just had to reframe how I saw their behavior, because otherwise we would just be butting heads the whole time, and I would hate coming to school every day. And so what this looks like, instead of thinking, oh God, so-and-so's coming right now, ugh, am I gonna make it through the day? Or oh, I can't wait till they go home. Instead of thinking of them that way and making the assumption that they are going to annoy you, assume that they're going to be awesome. And I know that's really hard, but assume that they are going to be like your favorite student. And eventually, I hate to say this, they're going to start behaving that way. They're not going to necessarily be your favorite student, but you're going to see a change in them because you're approaching them differently and they're going to approach you differently. And even if it's short-lived, just for this last month of school, it's still going to make that last month so much easier. The next thing you want to consider when preparing for the end of the school is how you're going to set everyone up for success. So as I mentioned before, what this looks like is not giving difficult work when you have also checked out and are burnt out and tired. So don't give students a packet of 30 pages while you sit at your desk staring at your screen. Not fair. They're burnt out and so are you. I also wouldn't assign work that's going to be difficult to grade. So again, I have talked before about how to grade quickly and how to grade less. So take those to heart, especially during this time of the year. Don't give them these multi-part assignments that you have to actually look at every single part in order to see if it's correct. Give them easy assignments, or even better, give them group assignments, or just something that's going to be really simple so that you don't have to do more work when you got a lot on your plate. It's also a really good time to find fun and meaningful assignments for students to do. I like to do a lot of reflection type assignments where they look back at how they've done and write about how they've grown in certain areas. I give them a list of areas of growth and say, hey, which one do you think you're better at right now? So things like that, where it's really low barrier to entry, where the students aren't stressed out about it and it's more personal and they can put a little more of their personality into it. And they're a lot more engaged that way, which honestly makes your job easier. If you know that the final is going to be really difficult, if you have a final at the end of the year, then focus on activities that will really prepare them for it so they'll be a little bit stressed out. In the past, I've given them question stems for the final, and I've let them break the question stem down so that they can see if they even understand what's being asked. I don't give them the real question, but when you do that, when you give them the question part of it, then it allows them to see if they understand it. If they don't, then you can give them feedback. That way, when they take the real final, they're less stressed out and they're more likely to be successful. Because something that's also kind of scary is if a bunch of people fail your final and then it lowers their grade significantly, then you're going to get a lot of parents emailing or calling or just visiting you out of the blue because they're upset about their kids' grades. And of course, just remember that every class and every grade is different in terms of what they need at the end of the school year. So maybe even talk to your colleagues and ask them how their students typically behave this time of year so that you can be proactive and you can set you and your students up for success so that you're not dragging yourself across the finish line. So if you want some concrete ideas in terms of fun and engaging types of lessons, especially project-based lessons, be sure to click on this video next to get those ideas.